Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today, we're going to be talking with someone who knows a lot about supply chain issues, which is an issue that's facing a lot of small businesses today. Raine Mahdi is a lifelong entrepreneur from San Diego with deep experience in sales, business development, and product sourcing. He's currently focused on building zipfox.com, the world's first global B2B product sourcing platform, and establishing new global norms for trade and hiring. Hey, Raine, welcome to the show today.
Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and every day just seems to get better. I got to tell you, I don't know what it is, but life is really good for me.
Wonderful.
So, you have quite a journey that you've told me, and I'd like you to take our listeners a little bit through your journey as an entrepreneur. Like, when did it first start? What was your first inkling to be an entrepreneur? And, maybe a little bit about your family of origin, the story, where you came from. Were they entrepreneurs? And like, where did it get into your bloodstream? Like, so kick us off with that, Raine.
Happy to do that. So I guess my exposure to entrepreneurship, I think from the deepest levels from first my parents. They both are entrepreneurial. My mom's journey to be in this country in itself is entrepreneurial. Kind of like, as I've shared with you, my mom and dad met in an international university in England. My dad is from Little Rock. My mom is from Iran. And then they went from England to another campus in Nairobi, Kenya, where I was almost born. And just at the last minute before I was born, they came here to San Diego, where my uncle was living, my dad's brother. He was managing Muhammad Ali's business. And
that's great.
Pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool.
There's a lot really cool.
There's tons of pictures of like my mom and my dad, like just eating dinner with Muhammad Ali and going to fights with him and hanging out. Like, it's pretty big.
That's epic. That's what people would say.
Yeah. So my mom and dad came here. Again, my dad didn't want to bring my mom back to Little Rock, where he was from. So they came to San Diego and set up shop. Now, shortly after they got here, my mom and dad split up. So now my mom is in this country that she doesn't know anybody or anything. And she went on welfare. And so that was kind of, she was raising me. She was trying to, kind of finish up schooling to become an accountant. And she was babysitting kids in the apartment building at the same time to try to, make some side money while she was going to school. So to me, that's entrepreneurship, right? Is like, here's a situation I'm in.
Yeah.
How do I solve this problem? Right.
Yep. Totally understand it. I mean, if your life is in turmoil so much, and I think that people who live on welfare, a lot of their lives are in turmoil. They're having trouble keeping their housing, keeping food on the table, keeping their kids out of trouble. They kind of have to figure out either how to be entrepreneurial or how to suck off. And sorry,
sink or swim.
Sink or swim. But I mean, some will utilize or just become dependent upon the system of the government as a safety net. And some will say, you know what, I'm not going to be a victim here. I'm going to make the best out of my life circumstances, and they're going to they're going to rise above it, and they're going to do something entrepreneurial to support themselves. So
I was talking to my daughter about this morning on the way to taking her to soccer practice, about how all of the best in you is brought out by adversity and by
yeah,
challenge, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so when you have the deepest levels of adversity and challenge, sure, majority of people won't survive that. They'll lean on the system, they'll give up, they'll fold. But those few who are willing to face that challenge and take on that challenge, you will see extraordinary results out of them. It's
yeah.
extremes on both ends.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I've had to follow some tough advice that I've just given to myself around my own parenting of a daughter,
Hmm.
and knowing that it's better for her to figure this stuff out herself than
Hmm.
to enable her with finances that she didn't earn. Let her, I mean, I'd rather see her struggle. Struggling at a young age is not as hard as struggling at an old age, I think.
Totally.
Um, eh,
And you're going to do
and
one of the two, right?
yeah, exactly. So figure out which one it is. So,
It's so
all right.
hard, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially for someone like myself that struggled to get to where I am.
Yeah.
And one of your dreams as you're working every day and trying to create this better way is, I'm going to create a better life for my kids. But it's so ironic that you get to that place where you're capable of doing that. And then it's like, wait a minute, I'm stealing the opportunity for you to build in that character. And it actually becomes counterproductive
Right.
to do those things that you wanted to do. Right. And
Yeah,
so
I
it's
want to
tough.
just repeat that phrase that you just said, because just trying to lock it in. You're stealing away from like that character that they could be building, and that's that's not a good thing to do,
It's not.
basically. Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. It's,
Um,
as parents, we never want to see our kids struggle. And when we're in a position to minimize how much they struggle, it's actually an unnatural and not a good thing,
mm,
because by nature you should struggle.
right.
And we would never choose for our kids to struggle. And so that's the crux of it all, is that they need that, but it's so hard for us to willingly and consciously let that happen to them. I wish I
Yeah,
was better
gosh.
at that.
Oh my
Right.
God, I wish I was better at it too. And yeah, there was a Jewish philosopher that I grew up with, understanding. His name was Abraham Joshua Hessel, and in the true nature of only remembering sound bites or 128 character like Twitter things, his phrase was, "The joy is in the struggle." And I always like remembered that as like a teenager, like that was really important. The joy is in the struggle. And so I think there's a lot of truth in that simple wisdom. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
glad to share it. All right.
Yeah.
So what was your first business that you started?
Right. So I guess just kind
How
of
old were you?
following that
Yeah.
path, like,
Hmm.
I guess exposure to my mom's own journey and trying to survive. And she did will herself out of that situation, eventually became the accountant, became a stockbroker. We moved out of that situation and, lived in La Jolla in a really nice place, and she was
Nice.
making a lot of money. And
Wow.
I remember vividly one of her first big paydays as a stockbroker in the 80s, going to the bank with her. She cashed her check into cash. I don't know why she did that.
Hmm.
And it was just, she showed me, it was this fat envelope with all these hundreds. And we were both kind of in awe of it together. Like,
Wow.
look what we've done. Right.
From
And
welfare to wealthy, living in La
right.
Jolla. I mean, doesn't
Yeah.
get much better in San Diego than that, right?
Right.
Hmm.
Especially back then, and so
Yeah.
it was, that affected me,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
I knew that we struggled. I knew that we worked our way out of it. And that was very important for me to see that,
Hmm.
you're not bound by your circumstances. You can change your circumstances. I don't think I consciously thought that at a young age, but
Hmm.
looking back, I did connect those dots, that like, wait, we were struggling. Now we're not. She worked really hard. You don't have to accept your circumstances.
Hmm.
And that's critical. That's key to everything I do. In the way, my perspective on everything is that it's up to you. You decide
Mm.
what the outcome's going to be. So
Mm.
there was that. But and then along the way, it was almost like Shark Tank. Driving around with my mom, I would come up with all these ideas. I was a kid that wrote short stories and poems, and I always had an idea for another business, and she always encouraged me. I don't even know if these ideas were any good, but she always made me think I had just come up with the best idea that ever
Wow.
was thought up, and that made me believe in my ideas. And that is another core aspect of being an entrepreneur, is everybody has ideas, but most people think that for some reason their ideas aren't viable, or, you know, they wouldn't be able to bring them to fruition. And when you have this belief that, like, I just thought of this thing and I can actually cultivate that, I can bring that into reality, to believe in your own vision is 99% of the battle when it comes to pursuing it, when it comes to getting other people to pursue it with you. It's
Mm-hmm.
really about being a visionary and believing it. So she really helped me believe in my own ideas. And then I think the last piece of it was, and this isn't a real business, but my mom was a big, obviously, an influence on me, but she used to take me to this donut shop every morning before school when I was in 7th grade. And we would get a donut, and we'd get a donut. And one day, I think she noticed there was a sign in the window that says a dozen day-old donuts for $1. Now, they were only a day old. It's not like they were moldy. Obviously, they were selling them. They were fine. But
Right.
instead of buying a donut for $1, she was like, why don't you buy a dozen donuts? You can go sell them at school, and then you have your donut and you have your lunch money. And, you know, I think, right.
Okay. Yeah.
And I
It
think,
worked.
somebody who worked their way out of welfare to becoming a stockbroker and blah, blah, blah from another, they
Yeah.
would think of that, right?
Of
They would
course.
see that and see opportunity in that.
Sure.
And I was like, yeah. And so she bought a dozen donuts that day instead of one donut. And I went to school and I sold them all. And before you know it, when I got to school, there'd be a line of kids lined up out front, waiting for me to arrive with this box of donuts. And I'd sell them all. I'd have a pocket jingling full of quarters. I'd have my lunch money and I'd be eating my donut. And that showed me that A, I can sell something, I can buy a product and I can sell it at a profit, and B, I can create demand. It started off with, hey guys, does anybody want to buy a donut? And it ended up with me showing up with my box of donuts, feeling like, you know, the champ is here.
Yeah.
I've got the donuts, guys. And everybody, yeah. And that affected me too, right? Like, hey, I can create something that people really want. And that's a
That's
good
great.
feeling.
That's great. And
And
your
so,
mom
yeah.
your mom probably didn't even use the word arbitrage, but you were buying
No.
something for a low price and selling it for a higher price, and
And to this day,
within
it's my
hours.
favorite style of business. I love arbitrage. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's great.
love,
Yeah,
yeah,
seeing a gap. So,
yeah,
well, it sounds like you were prolific isn't the right word, but you were a kid that was interested in a lot of different things and doing a lot of different things. And
yeah.
so you sound like a real visionary also, which is a really important thing for an entrepreneur to be. And so a lot of entrepreneurs
Thank you.
struggle with execution. And so they find themselves a partner in a chief operating officer, an implementer, an integrator, a general manager. And you know, it's interesting because that's always been my path in life. I've always been like the number two guy, the CEO whisperer, sometimes I called myself, and
Mm,
because that's what I did really well. And because I got the vision, I got the entrepreneurial idea, but my brain wasn't sparking all the time with those ideas, and
mm.
I was a great taskmaster in getting things done. So, did you notice, or is execution a challenge for you even to this day, or did you notice back then that you were always coming up with ideas, and then before you'd execute, you'd be on, you know, thinking about the next idea?
Yeah, there's a journey to that. And there's a journey to arriving at the idea that you can execute and be consistent and persistent with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at first you're kind of swinging at every pitch. Oh, here's an idea, you pursue it, and then you
Right.
drop it. I'm
Right.
over that. And you start to realize you have to know what ideas to sell yourself. The first person you have to sell on it is yourself.
Yeah.
And so now I'm a tougher sale than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I hear an idea or I think of an idea, obviously, like
Right.
I'm vetting it better.
Of
I'm not just
course.
going, oh, that's cool. I'm going, well, wait a minute. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what does step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 look like? Is there going to be enough there? Is this deep enough of an idea that I can actually take it and run with it? And so
Sure.
therein lies the ability to continue coming up with ideas, continue staying engaged, is that there has to be enough meat on the bone to begin with.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. And we all know that building a strong team, and especially in today's day and age where I think guys like you and me, we're working our business remotely. We're not, you know, we're not running everyone coming into an office and having to be location dependent. So we've got
Right.
to build a strong team with accountability and with personality types or behavioral profile preferences that complement our own. So
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. You so bring us quickly to the journey of where you got to where you're at now. You're
Right.
like what? businesses did you iterate
Right.
and to get to the point where you started this, supply chain, this
So yeah, kind of
sourcing?
quickly, I started an e-commerce drop shipping business.
Mm-hmm.
I had this, it's funny. I remember I was on the phone with my dad.
Give us a date, by the way. Like, when are we talking about?
Mm,
Like
this is
approximately, or age
this
or
is
something.
yeah, this is thir this is 13 years ago.
Okay, perfect.
Whatever that is, but I
Yep.
know I have a landmark in my mind that's letting me know that it's 13.
Yep.
So this is 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an idea. I've seen somewhere, I don't know where I've seen it, but I've seen one of these watches that is a cell phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Big bulky G-Shock looking thing, but I've seen a watch that's a cell phone. And I said, those are cool. People would like those. I want to find those. I want to sell them. And I talked to my dad about it. And my dad was like, oh, you should look in China.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody is aware of China, stuff in China. But it had never dawned on me to, deploy my love for arbitrage on the biggest suppliers in the world and say, wait, there's a bunch of stuff I can buy there that I can sell. And it
Yep.
all kind of came together in that moment. I was like, China, why didn't I think of that? So I start looking for Chinese suppliers of this watch. And I found them. I found a website that had
Cool.
these watches,
Right.
but the more I looked into it, I realized the different frequencies that they have to work on and blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's actually more complicated than I thought. You can't just buy the watch and people start using them. There's all this other stuff that has to happen that I don't know enough about. And that's not as exciting of an idea. But in the course of finding those watches, I found tons of other suppliers for other stuff that I was like, but I can sell that. I can sell that. I can sell that. I can sell that.
Wow.
So I set up an e-commerce drop shipping website that had all kinds of different stuff, from like sports equipment to clothes and toys and all kinds of different stuff. And I realized I didn't know about drop shipping, but I thought this up on my own. Like, I invented drop shipping, even though it's been around probably since like forever and ever. But without anybody telling me about it, I invented it all over again. And I was like, I can just like put up pictures from these suppliers on my website. People will buy it. And then when they give me the money, I'll buy it from the supplier and have them ship it directly to the drop shipping, right?
Yep.
And so I did it. And it worked out pretty well. And in the course of that, I had to talk to all these different Chinese suppliers and negotiate pricing and figure out who's got low quality, good quality, bad quality, all this different stuff. And I spent months just going after the supply. And that was a crash course in sourcing products from China. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing.
And were you selling, so you were selling products on your e-commerce website, right? You weren't fulfilling other people's product sales.
Exactly. I had a website that was my own. I made flyers. I went around and handed out the flyers. I put up banner ads on different websites, generated traffic to it. And yeah, people would come in and I'd have the picture of the product there that I had never actually touched myself.
Yep.
And they would buy it and, drop shipping. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, but I learned another lesson about supply in China, which is at some point I started getting people complaining that some of my stuff was counterfeit. Now, I didn't even know that these products, some of the products that I was selling, were even branded or trademark or patented designs of anything. It's products I didn't know myself, like the solar powered, charger or something. I thought it was just this factory's making this stuff, but lo and behold, this is actually like an exact replica of somebody else's product, just doesn't have their logo on it.
So were you getting cease and desist of sale certain items, or were you getting sued, or what was going on?
No, not that heavy, but I was using PayPal as my payment processor. And so people were just filing, refunds or whatever. And and so what happened is it started happening enough, which is a really great lesson for me in kind of business development, but it started happening enough that I started looking at some of the products and I was like, there's too much going on here. And so I stopped everything and I went back whatever I could, 30 days or whatever the money I had left. And I was like, okay, all these customers that ordered, I'm just, without them even asking, I'm just going to initiate a refund and send them all their money back and just shut the thing down. Now, terrible move on my behalf.
Yeah.
Because
sounds radical.
Very radical. I reached a speed bump and I thought it was a dead end. And there are a couple times that happened to me of different businesses that I've started and I've reached this kind of roadblock and I've gone, oh, this is the end. And I didn't realize that is the normal path of any business is you reach
obstacles.
that point.
Yeah. To get over, and
obstacle.
you have to, right. Exactly. Okay.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, the donuts were 4 days old or a week old and like you couldn't sell them and you thought, okay, the donut business is over, but no. it's
No,
not the way it ends. I mean, we'll get
that's
back
where
to
it's
another
time to
time
start
how the donut
solving.
business ended.
Yeah.
It probably moved on to high school and it was competition. No.
Yeah, no, totally, totally, right? Seriously.
Yeah,
So
like
I love that you said that, because that's the epiphany moment that I had before I started the first business I did that actually succeeded. I looked back on all these different businesses that I had started, and then they reached that kind of moment, and I was like, this isn't working, and I
yeah.
quit. And looking back, I was able to literally, I was sitting on my couch one day and I thought back about this one and I was like, oh my God, if I would have just done this, that could have
Right.
worked. Then the
Right.
next one, oh my God, I could have. And I had this mind blowing moment where I was like, none of those businesses were failures. They were all
Wow.
great ideas, but I
Wow.
reached this moment that I thought was the end, and it was just a roadblock. And there's a pattern here. Every single business that I started reaches that moment. You must have to persist through that in order for it to work.
Wow.
Aha.
Wow. So what
And when,
drugs were you on when you were sitting on the couch?
dude,
No, that's
I
not a
know,
serious
man.
question.
I know, seriously. It was like that.
Yeah.
It was like a
It's like,
drug-induced moment where my
right.
mind was just so open that I could see it so clearly.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting when people run into obstacles that they think, well, maybe I should shrink back. I was on a call yesterday with a prospective client, and he was telling me that he's built the company up to a certain size, and he's thinking about just like maybe shrinking back or maybe getting into something else. And I just thought to myself, you just didn't check a box that you need to for us to work together. I'm sorry. I said, you seem like you're humble, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt. You seem like you're smart, and those are two things I look for, but you don't have the hunger. So
Mm,
there's no fit here. I'm sorry.
that's it.
Right.
That's
So,
it.
because like, could you imagine being a coach, like in my position, and coming to someone who said, I think I've reached the end. If I can't get you to fall back in love with your business and figure out that there's another avenue and quickly, if you've, in this case, this person had lost their mojo, and I said, you should go to like a Tony Robbins workshop or something, find your mojo and call me back.
Yeah.
Maybe I can help you. But yeah, so that's interesting. That's a
Yeah,
great
there's nothing
insight.
that you
So
can do as a coach for them,
it's not
because,
worth it.
and then it
Yeah.
becomes your failure, right? It's like, I hired
Yeah.
this coach and he didn't help me.
Yep, exactly. And then they're like, don't, bad Google review. This guy
Yeah,
didn't deliver. I'm like, that's not what I should have been hired for. So, all
totally.
right. So that's
So,
great. All
so
right.
and
So how
I'm taking
many,
too long on this because I know
no,
it's a
it's fine.
40.
But how long did you have the e-commerce business for? Like, what was the life cycle of it?
That was maybe a 6-8 month thing. Well, like 6 months
Wow.
setting it up and then maybe 6 months running it and then go. So maybe a year total. It was
Yeah,
it was a
right.
quick thing.
You were fast.
Yeah.
Learn quickly.
Yeah. So then I worked at this juice company in San Diego. I took a job because I had started another company, a coffee company, a t-shirt company. And I was like, all of them were reaching these moments. And I was like, there's something that I'm missing.
Mm-hmm.
I need to go work, because I hadn't had a lot of like jobs, like long jobs or
Mm-hmm.
corporate jobs. And I was like, maybe there's a missing element or a missing ingredient that I need. And let me go work with somebody else and maybe I can pick it up there. So my girlfriend's dad was working at this juice company, and I asked him to get me a job there because it seemed like a really early kind of startup vibe. I felt like, it seems like a really good idea. They're delivering fresh juice to people's doors, like the milkman.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be growing really quickly. Maybe I can get in there. And so I got in, and I'm pouring juice in a bottle in the kitchen like a machine. Like that was my job.
Mm.
But anything that I do, I cannot not try to be the best at it. Not competition with other people, but I cannot
Right.
not give it my all.
It
And
sounds
so
like
I'm
it.
the best damn juice pourer and a bottler that you've ever seen,
It's a
right?
pretty limiting job for a guy like you, it sounds like, but
I'll
maybe at the
do
time.
anything to feed
Right.
my family, and I'll
Yeah,
do anything when I
I'm
need to.
I'm with you as well. I never quit a job until you have another one lined up back in the day, and always try and move up and get something to get into something else.
That's right.
Just yeah.
At that time, I was working moving couches and stuff. I think I told you before, but I was working for a home staging company. We would be
Mm-hmm.
in a truck moving furniture around, setting up furniture for real estate agents and investors. I'd be up and down the freeway in this moving truck, sometimes 30-hour shifts. And then that juice company was only on Sundays at the time. They were in a shared kitchen. I would show up there at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd drink 2 rock stars, and I'd work until 7, 8 o'clock at night straight through. They would try to tell me to take lunch. I wouldn't take lunch. I'd work straight through. That's
Mm,
just the way that nobody asked me to do. That's who I am.
right.
So a couple
You could
weeks into
never
work.
be an employee, by the way, because the meal and wage breaks that are required in
Yeah,
California,
yeah,
you wouldn't take them, and they would be like, we're going to have to fire. You're our best employee, Raine, but we're
yeah.
going to have to fire you because you put us in jeopardy of violating too many wage and hour laws.
I worked at a gym 15 years ago. I worked at LA Fitness. I was selling personal training, and I had never sold personal training. I wasn't, I hadn't even been in a gym in years when I took that job, but I needed a job. And within 3 months, I was the #1 salesperson in California. And I was so obsessed again with that job that they told me that if I didn't take, even though I was the best salesperson, they said if I didn't take a day off after like a few months of me being there, that they were going to have to fire me because I just wouldn't take a day off.
Wow. Okay.
Anyway,
we get what you're made of, and we got to bring this story into the present because we got to talk about some supply chain stuff.
For sure.
This is something that a lot of people that maybe my listeners, I've never had anyone on the show talk about. Sourcing from China overseas. What are the challenges? What are the dirty little secrets companies are keeping about how they pay their team members in developing countries? I want to get into that stuff before we run out of time.
So then let me wrap that all up. So then in a nutshell, I worked for this company. He ended up, needing some help developing the thing, which was exactly what I was looking for. And I helped this guy build a sales department, hire every single, position you could imagine, do a rebranding, remake the website. I was doing everything. And one of the things I was in charge of was purchasing some of the packaging and things that they were using. And as I started doing that through the vendors he already had set up in the US, I realized these are just US distributors who are buying in China and reselling it to us at a markup. And I go, wait a minute, I know how to buy stuff in China. I go, listen, man, we could save a lot of money if you let me try to find factories in China instead of buying it from these guys. And so I did. And in the first year that we did that, I saved that company about $250,000, which to a small business is a lot of money straight back to your bottom line.
Sure. And did you have to go to China to do this, by the way? Or
no, I did it on like Alibaba, Global Sources, like the typical Chinese product sourcing platforms that are
just
still out there
you're sitting at a desk with a computer here in San Diego or something.
Yes. And it was scary, man, because, I had done this stuff before, but now I'm spending more money. These are larger orders. I'm using somebody else's money. So it's not my risk, it's his risk. And I spent 3 months talking to suppliers, vetting as best as I could, which is nearly nothing. And even at the end, when I finally was ready to make a decision, I felt like I was just crossing my fingers and throwing a dart blindly and hoping that I wouldn't lose this guy's money. And luckily enough, I didn't lose his money. And again, we found this one vendor and we kind of worked with them and we saved some money. And so, after saving this guy all this money, I would have thought there'd be a bonus or a raise or something. And it really wasn't even so much about money. Just the guy was very condescending and there was no gratitude there. And so I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. If I can save this guy this amount of money, I'm sure that I can find other small and medium-sized businesses that would like to source products from China to save money, but it's too risky, it's too dangerous, they don't know where to start. And so just like this company was, they're paying triple the price to some US distributor just because that distributor has the factory in China. They have figured it out. And so they're just middlemaning you, putting a markup on. It's coming from China, but you don't know how to do that. So maybe I can help more people do that. And so I set up a website and I had my partner, Danny, my best friend, I had him I wrote a cold email and I had him start sending that email out to as many companies as we could. Anything that people were selling that I thought we could source in China. I didn't care if it was a bottle or a computer mouse or a pair of shirts. I didn't care what it was. Send them an email and say, we can save you money on X product and, let us get you a quote. And so all the quotes started coming in and, we started working that way. I started realizing after a while that it's difficult to stand between buyers and suppliers for every product because every product has so many specs and details. And so we narrowed the focus to just packaging. We did really well for that for a few years. And then I woke up one day and I realized, we're selling a lot of packaging here, but this was not the goal I set out for. Originally, I set out to make it safer and easier to source products. And it's still difficult. It's still just Alibaba, which is, the most dangerous landscape you could possibly try to navigate. There's no safer solutions out there. And now we've got this trade war. People are paying 25% tariffs on everything they import from China. We've got port congestion. People are waiting months and months and months, having delays, trying to wait for their products. Now they're trying to buy tons and tons of products to kind of backstock things so that they don't run out. And that's tying up a bunch of cash flow. And I was like, we need to make a better sourcing platform. And then I started looking at Mexico and I was like, if we sourced from Mexico, we have a free trade agreement with them. We can get deliveries in 5 to 10 days instead of 5 to 8 weeks. Shipping cost is less. There's way less geopolitical tension and risk. There's no trade war or anything like that going on.
Yep.
Proximity just means it makes a lot of sense. And Mexico is the #2 supplier to the U.S. behind China. So they have the
But do they have the
capability, the
quality?
capacity, they have
Do
the
they
quality.
do they really?
They
So
do.
I'm just going to share your website because just pulling it up. I love the beauty and simplicity of the way you present it.
Thanks.
Um, so let's
There's a
talk about.
redesign coming soon.
Okay, well, good, always,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, always.
Um, so you've shifted away from relying on China for goods, and the question always is, is the quality, is the engineering, is the design, is the QC, is it as good coming from Mexico? Would you recommend people shift their sourcing from China to Mexico?
You know what's hilarious, John? I just realized this right now. I've had that question obviously many times because it's the first
I'm
thing you might think.
I'm sure.
And I have never thought about this until this moment. It's the same thing it's so funny how many people talk about cheap China quality, and now we're saying is Mexico as good a quality as China? Isn't that weird?
Right. But the Chinese are really good at knocking things off. They're good
Yeah, they
at
are.
copying and making it almost as good. And it seems as though that's their specialty.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
like they're like what's really good about American workers, or I shouldn't say American workers. What I think is unique about our economy here in the United States
Yeah.
is that we're building a knowledge and have been building a knowledge-based economy, and we
Mhm.
have knowledge workers. And
Yep.
as long as we have smart knowledge workers,
Mhm.
then we will have some kind of economic competitive advantage. As soon as we let that go, then it won't be as good. And it seems as though the knowledge in Japan is maybe almost as good, and the knowledge in China doesn't seem as good, but it seems like they're very competent with precise, engineering of products. And so I'm working with a client right now that's has contract manufacturing in China, and
Mhm.
they're looking to source from Mexico, and they're challenged by it.
Yeah.
And they're in like pager notification speaker business, so
Mhm.
it's challenging. So maybe.
Yeah, I can speak to that. If you think about it, it's 1999, 2000. Alibaba came on the scene, democratizing access to Chinese manufacturing. China joins the World Trade Organization. And that's when that's when the shift away from American manufacturing to Chinese manufacturing really took foot.
Mhm.
And in that last, what is that, 20 years or so,
Yep.
it's going on 25 years almost. In that
Almost.
amount of time, they have had an enormous amount of opportunity to develop infrastructure, processes, capability, capacity because of so much US money flowing in, so much opportunity to develop, to make mistakes, to build a new factory, to build a new process. So, yeah, they're really good. They're
Yeah.
really good. They're
Yeah.
really smart at that because they get the lion's share of that opportunity. And I
Correct.
think one of the good ways to look at, a good way to look at who else might have a parallel to that is Mexico, because again, they're the #2 supplier to the
Mhm.
US. And people
Mm.
don't realize that Mexico does so much manufacturing for us. A lot of it in the automotive industry, which is very sophisticated. It's a very sophisticated product to make a car, right? There's
Sure.
everything that goes into that, from
Yes.
computers to machining to everything else. And a lot of clothing, a lot of agriculture too, but that doesn't have anything to do with manufacturing mostly.
Mhm.
So they're amazing at manufacturing. The quality is amazing. You can find the whole spectrum of quality in China, and the whole spectrum of quality in Mexico, and the whole spectrum of quality in the United States as well. So it's really not a question of is, you know, all encompassing, is Mexico low quality or high quality, or China or US. It's how are you going about vetting the proper supplier? How are you communicating the details? What is your process that you're using to engage a new supplier? And that has weighs have more heavily on the result that you end up with than Mexico versus China, as a whole. So I
Do
think
you
that's
think that
important.
too many people compare and just look at the price? And so that's their main thing. It's almost like I used to say, you're choosing a contractor for your house, a remodel of your bathroom or your kitchen. And most people don't know enough to ask contractors the type of questions that would help them distinguish one contractor from the next. So they see this one is 100, whatever, $100,000, and this one's $60,000. So they think, well, it seems like they're the same. They don't have any basis of comparison.
Yeah, you
What?
definitely become, I
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah, you definitely become an educated buyer, right? And
Yep.
I've run into some very educated buyers that know how to buy. They know where to cut corners, where not, right? They
Right.
know where something smells funny and something's a good deal because there's a difference. I do think that you will find more people in China, from my experience, you will find more people in China willing to sell you a cheap, almost unusable product for a price that you can't beat. And I think there's more of those traps set in China than in Mexico, by far.
Wow. I remember when we were, I got into a shoe manufacturing venture with someone back in, 1989, I think it was. I'm sorry, 1998. Had my numbers backwards. And yeah, as a matter of fact, I think it was my dream last night, coincidentally enough.
Wow.
And so we had shoes that we were making, and we had them knocked off in China intentionally and brought to us. And boy, they were cheap, and they smelled awful. They smelled like, I couldn't even put them in my garage. The smell was so bad.
Yeah.
And
what, like chemicals or something?
Yeah, like some formaldehyde or so. The glue. I was like, oh God, what are they using? So real quick, if the average product that you'd be sourcing in the United States, if it's 100, and maybe you can't answer this question because it's too generic, but if it's 100 cents on the dollar, how many cents on the dollar is it in China? How many cents on the dollar is it in Mexico? Or can't you answer it because it really depends upon the category we're talking about?
It really does, but I get what you're trying to ask. I would say, if you want me to generalize it,
please.
And I get it. And it's, again, this is difficult because every product is different, right?
Right.
In the United States, if it's $100, in China, maybe it's 30 or $40
landed.
I'm just, this is
okay. Is that landed with tariffs and all taxes and whatever duties? I mean,
and then so it starts to get even more complicated because what's the size of the product? Different products ship different, right?
Okay. So but let's stick with the 30 then.
Let's just do product. Okay. So I'm already reaching as it is, John.
Yeah,
so $100 for the product in the United States, 30, $40 in China. In Mexico, you could be 30 to $50. Now,
okay, comparable.
Right, comparable. Here's the thing is, when you compare now, China, like US is a different thing. You want US product. I still haven't figured out the rationale for it, aside from just wanting to invest in domestic supply. Good for you. And I applaud you for that. That's fine. At some point, we will have US manufacturers on the platform as well.
Well, but I think also if you're doing more short run custom manufacturing, then the US makes a lot of sense, right?
You can get it from Mexico as fast as you can get it from the US.
Oh, wow.
Because a lot of manufacturing in the US, I mean, there's obviously factories everywhere, so I don't mean to generalize, but there's a lot of manufacturing in the Midwest. If I'm in California, if I make something in the Midwest, it's going to get here at the same time that it would get here from Mexico.
Okay.
So there's not a speed advantage.
Okay.
Or really a shipping cost advantage. And if it qualifies for USMCA, then there's no duty, and so there's no tariff or anything. So there's really no benefit other than you're contributing to domestic economy, which again, hats off to you. But where you start to compare China to Mexico, that's where you have to look deeper beyond the cost of the good itself, right? So if you're looking at something in China that's 30 and you look at it in Mexico and it's 40, many people will stop there. But what you have to look at now is your shipping cost. Your shipping cost from Mexico is going to be a third of the cost of what it is from China.
And time, also, the amount of time it's going to take.
The amount of time it's going to take you, maybe 5-6 weeks longer than it will get coming from Mexico.
Right.
And when you add that 25% tariff to the $30 cost in China, now it's what is that, $37.50 would it be? So now you're already at the 40, and then your shipping costs and then your time. So at the end of the day, you may realize that you're paying the same landed cost from China as you are from Mexico. The only difference is, do you want to get it in 5 to 10 days, or do you want to get it in 5 to 7 weeks? So And I'm just talking about shipping time, not production time, because that again
Makes
varies
sense.
by product.
It makes a lot of sense.
So
So
that's the true comparison. And we're working on some infographics, videos, educational content that we can use to help people really see that point in a simple way, kind of like how you laid out your book in very simple way to digest. We want to lay that out in a very simple way, because if you don't catch that point, you may miss the big opportunity. If you just look at 30 versus 40 and stop there, you may be paying more and or waiting a lot longer than you need to. That's aside from this geopolitical risk and the threat that at some point you may have even higher tariffs coming from China, or worst case scenario, a sanction that we can't do business with China.
right.
Those are maybe somewhat extreme cases, depending on
Okay.
your opinion of the situation, but plausible, realistic, nonetheless.
Okay. Quick question. Then I want to talk about ZipFox.
Yeah.
What's the dirty little secret companies are keeping about how little they pay their team members in developing countries?
That is something that is near and dear to me. So my last company, Hawk Packaging, all of my employees were remote. At first, I started with friends working for me, paying them under the table. At some point, they had to go get real jobs and make more money than I was able to pay them. And I thought to myself, how am I going to do this? I live in San Diego. If I try to hire a salesperson, it's going to be minimum $5,000. And after they make their first sale, they're going to be looking at me saying, where's my raise? Right. So there was no way that I could afford that. And I tried to hire a virtual assistant. The company in the US that was an agency for the virtual assistants, they didn't get back to me for like 2 weeks. And I was like, this company needs a virtual assistant.
Right.
And I stumbled across Upwork. And I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with
Very
Upwork?
familiar with it. Been using it for years, and that's how I found one of my key marketing people who's been in India, and he's done everything from website to SEO to social media to he used to manage all the back end promoting on YouTube and things like that for this website. He's done a lot of stuff for me. I've been working with him for 5-6 years.
Upwork is the single most pivotal introduction to modern business.
Yes.
Across the entire board. There is nothing that is more landscape changing and pivotal than the introduction of the global talent pool and the access to that. It is a gold rush. It is a game changer, and especially for small businesses who many times their largest expense is their manpower, right? That's the biggest part of their overhead.
Yeah.
If they're not leveraging that. Anyway,
I've had clients who are in the construction industry leveraging people they found through Upwork.com in the Philippines who are doing a particular function in their landscaping business at a tenth of the hourly rate that they would pay a US-based person. Amazing.
My lead salesperson at Hawk Packaging, the month that I left there, he sold $600,000 worth of packaging in that month. This was a product that I thought was too sophisticated for me to even train people in the US to sell if they didn't have an experience and a background in packaging sales, because it seems simple, but there's some science to it and a lot of different options. And that was my challenge as an entrepreneur, is how do I break that? How do I simplify the process of training and selling this stuff, get it down to a level where an entry-level person with no experience and background in packaging can learn it, they can sell it to businesses who are educated buyers. And that was my challenge. And if you're able to do that, then you get the McDonald's, right? Where you can bring anybody in and produce a quality result, consistent result. And so I did systematize that. I did simplify it, and I got it down to the point where I could teach this very, very intelligent man from the Philippines with an accent that sounded like he was from Orange County, yet he had never been to the US. I've never been more impressed by somebody. And he was able to buy himself a house, take his mother on vacation, buy a piece of property on the beach. And it was a life-changing opportunity for him. And I thought about that, and and everybody I hired after that, he saved my business. Those people that I hired a logistics manager at the same time in Mumbai, India. I hired a production manager in Pakistan, and those people saved my business, because I would not have been able to proceed after that without being able to tap more friends that I was underpaying. And I paid them the best that I could. And it's funny, because here's what I realized. A lot of people, you go down this path when you start looking on Upwork, or you look at the global talent pool, and maybe you're hiring in India or the Philippines, and you Google, because you don't know what you should pay these people. And so you'll Google, what's the minimum wage in the Philippines, or what's the, cost of rent in the Philippines? You try to get some understanding for the cost of living in that area. And what a lot of people are doing is they're being greedy. Even these companies that call themselves socially responsible, is they'll look up, what is the minimum wage in the Philippines? Oh, $600 a month. Great. Then they go on Upwork and they start hiring people, and they start offering them $500 a month, negotiating them down, $550. Okay, fine. Are you kidding me? You would have paid that person $5,000, $8,000 if you hired them in the US, and now you just negotiated this person in a developing country down from $600 to $550. And you don't tell anybody about that. They don't talk about that. That's the dirty little secret, is that people are starting to discover this opportunity to leverage the global talent pool, but they're grossly underpaying them.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's something that you can only get away with in the very beginning, while there's not a lot of awareness and regulation, almost like what's happening with crypto right now, where it's early, and so you can get away with things and do weird things because it's just wide open. And that's what's happening right now with, we're getting away with, not we, but people are getting away with treating their team members in other countries in a way that's unacceptable, and they would never want the world to know what they're doing. And so what we're trying to do with ZipFox, aside from establishing a set of global trade norms, because also different countries like to trade and do business differently, and we want to kind of bring that into one central place, we're also trying to be vocal about this. So I appreciate the question. We're trying to be vocal about how we're hiring and treating our staff. If you're giving stock options in California, give stock options in the Philippines. Why not?
Sure.
If you're paying people a living wage that they can live a certain standard of life and maybe cover medical expenses and whatnot, why aren't you doing that for the person who's equally, maybe even more dedicated in another country? And what you get in return when you create an opportunity for somebody like that is a level of dedication and a work ethic that is, in my opinion, many times unmatched.
Yeah, it's been my experience as well. And it's crazy.
Right?
I just was Googling the Philippines minimum wage rate 2022. Approximate yearly minimum wage, $2,053 yearly.
And that's what they'll try to pay. They'll say, I know you can live off of that, and that makes me sick, to be honest. I mean, I don't want to, it really upsets me because it's inhumane. And the what they're missing, though, right? Because it's really hurting them more than anybody else. What they're missing is the opportunity to create life-changing opportunities for very intelligent, creative, hardworking, dedicated people, and get people to serve their company and their team and their purpose and follow their vision with them and build a strong team. And the gratification that I got out of seeing a picture of that salesperson in the Philippines standing in front of his house that he bought, the picture of him at the mall on the weekend taking his mother shopping, finding out that he bought a beach property, and the joy, my logistics coordinator in Mumbai, when he got his third raise and he tried to tell me it's too much, I can't accept it. And I told him, you don't have a choice. And he said, I can't wait until my wife wakes up so I can tell her. It's mutually beneficial. So I can say, maybe I would pay $7,000 in the US for that. Maybe the minimum wage in Mumbai is $500. I'm not going to pay you $500. Let's start you at $1,500 and let's work you up to $3,000, $4,000. And by the time you get to $4,000, you're making more money than doctors in your area. You can't believe how much money you're making. My overhead is lower. I'm not paying $15,000 to somebody in San Diego because they want to go to the sushi bar every weekend, or I don't know what, and pay $150 for a meal, right? So it's mutually beneficial. And I think what we're able to do is leverage that currency difference between countries. That's really what it is. The US dollar is worth more than the ruble. So fine, right? And because of that, we can help people. And isn't that what your business should be doing? Shouldn't your business be there to serve the people who work there and the customers? And how better way to serve your team members and the people who contribute to what you're trying to build than to help them live that quality of life? And again, it's even a small business can accomplish that, where you might not be able to do that locally. You can do that, in another country very easily. So
good for you, Raine. That's enlightening. It makes me, I always pay them whatever they think it's worth. And I try and throw them as much work as possible. So I'll have to rethink my own payment to them because, but I, you know, sometimes I haven't always been too thrilled with the quality, but the quantity was definitely there. And for certain things, technical related, they were much faster and than anyone I could hire here. So, all
Well,
right.
it's a parallel to, like, finding a factory. You can
Yep.
find good and bad people
Yep.
everywhere. And so you
Exactly.
just got to, be
Yeah.
careful with that.
All
Yeah.
right. ZipFox, real simply put, elevator pitch. What's it all about?
People need to find supply outside of China. Were no options outside of China. Alibaba is a 99.9% Chinese marketplace. It's not a global marketplace. Again, living through the trade war, realizing that supply could be disrupted, whether it's by high tariff costs that get applied without any warning or possibly a disruption in supply altogether. How is it that we're still making payments to risky suppliers in other countries with no recourse, no protection for our payments if something goes wrong, no way to know who we're really dealing with? I've dealt with suppliers on Alibaba, then flown to China and saw that they were night and day different from who they presented. I've been scammed by an Alibaba Gold supplier for $20,000 and nobody could help me recover my money.
Wow.
And I wrote a note when I started this business and I said, build the platform that you wish you would have had when you started. And that's what we're still doing. We're building a platform where you know who you're dealing with. You have options outside of China. Your payments are protected. And that's it. And then again, in that same course of business, as a buyer myself, realizing how beneficial it would be to be able to work with Mexico, and that didn't exist out there, I said that doesn't make any sense. And now we have more Mexican manufacturers, more Mexican suppliers on our platform than any other website in the world. If you are looking for a supplier in Mexico, we are absolutely the go-to destination.
That's so awesome. How old is the business?
We launched this year. So we kind of soft launched in February,
Okay.
and then started ramping things up a bit more in May. And now we've been raising money. We just closed our kind of like a pre-seed round. And so we're ramping up supply heavily. Every day that you come back to the website, you're going to find more and more supply. And we're going to start kind of running a lot more kind of ad campaigns and getting some exposure towards the top of the year. So it's still a very new business. But
sounds like it. What's the next tipping point for you, or critical mass for your company?
So we're very supply focused. In any marketplace, you're going to have obviously a supply and a demand side, and one of those sides is higher or harder than the other. And so the reason why this is an opportunity is because that Mexican supply is difficult to find and to onboard. And so that is the hard work that we're doing, is going out, scouring the internet, scouring the phone line, scouring the lists, finding the factories, calling them, vetting them, explaining to them about bringing their businesses online, something many of them haven't done before,
Right.
and democratizing that access. So for us, we're mainly focused on supply right now because we know that the demand is easy. Everybody wants it. Everybody is looking for ways out of China. The messages we get, everybody's looking for the supplier in Mexico. And so us just being able to meet that demand, that's the most important thing. The next tipping point for us is, being able to say, okay, we've got a viable amount of supply in these categories. Now let's go focus on some of these other categories, and potentially where we start expanding beyond Mexico into other countries that have manufacturing capability as well, Central America, South America. And then similar to how Mexico has a proximity to the US, which makes it an attractive trading partner, there are other relationships like that as well, like possibly some of the African countries like Egypt that has proximity to the UK. And so establishing that and really bringing into view the bigger picture idea that we have about a global marketplace, which is I can't believe that doesn't exist. I can't believe we're the team that's building that it didn't already happen.
So exciting,
That's
Raine.
it.
So
Yeah.
exciting. When I was in business school in 1989 or 88, my business school professor talked about what he called the corridor theory of entrepreneurship, which is that you go down the corridor, you think you're heading to this, room, this is where your business is, you open up a door, and lo and behold, there's a much larger room, and it's more interesting and it's more worthy of your challenge. And you're like, well, wait a second, I think this is a little bit of a pivot. Maybe our business is not about just sourcing from Mexico. Maybe it's about building a B2B platform that people can buy from neighboring or whatever, from other countries. So it facilitates trade. And so lo and behold, each door maybe leads to another door until you feel like you finally arrived. And look, this has been a great time listening to you. You're a fireball of energy and enthusiasm, and I'm sure that's completely infectious and wins over investors and partners. And so what I want to wrap up with is, what's one piece of advice you would give successors in family business if they want to be a disruptive successor? And so they're taking over maybe their parents' business or their parents' business, and they want to carry on the legend, but they need to put their own imprint. And, given some of your entrepreneurial experience, whether it's going back to the donut selling days or to today's, like, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I have 4 kids. And so I think about if there is a succession from myself to them. And the thing that comes to mind mostly is, first, the idea of succession at all. I think that's the first that's the first checkpoint that you have to pass. Is this a natural progression, or is this a forced progression? I think you need to be really, really, really clear. I think there's this there's an attractiveness about handing something down to your kids, and you want to make sure you're not forcing that. So, and I could see kids maybe feeling the pressure that mom, dad wants me to take over the business at some point. Maybe that's not what they want to do. I've seen it go well. I've seen it not go well. So I think the first thing is, do you genuinely, wholeheartedly have the desire to take this business and run with it? And if you do, then your question kind of answers itself, because if you are excited about taking over the business, there has to be a why. There has to be a legacy you feel like you can continue, or your own chapter that you feel you can add to the book, which obviously that's going to vary business by business, industry by industry. But if you have the inspiration to even do it, that's questions already answered.
There you go. And so that's exactly what I discuss in my book, by the way, which you'll get a copy of after the show. Cool. It's about finding your why, and it's not the why that the founder or the predecessor had. Your why is going to be different. You have to find that why. If you're going to take the business to a whole new level, if you're going to be disruptive, then you've got to build on and find your own why. So, Raine, it's been great having you on the show. And I wish you tremendous success in your business. And I will certainly point any clients that I know who are looking to source things from Mexico. I have one in mind in particular. I'll try and make an introduction. Wish you the greatest success. Love, peace, joy. And folks, you know the drill. If you like this episode, please share it with others, subscribe, and give us a great rating. Give us a great 5-star rating on your listening app or podcast app of choice. So that's it. It's a wrap.
Thank you. Awesome.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful, so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.